Okay, so shucks, is this like what are we on? Lesson Part D, Airspace, Lesson 3 or something like that? In any case, it's November 9th, a Thursday, and we just finished Class Echo, Class E Airspace. So the next thing we're going to do is Class G, Class Golf Airspace. So Class Golf is called Uncontrolled Airspace. It's called Uncontrolled Airspace because the FAA, because air traffic control doesn't pay any attention to anybody that's there. So if somebody's down in there flying IFR, they don't have to talk on the radio. They don't have to file a flight plan, but they could still be in a cloud. But it's very much less likely they're doing that. And between you and me, if you're in IFR, if you're flying IFR and you're in uncontrolled airspace, that means there could be another airplane in the cloud with you, and nobody knows the other airplane is there because no one's talking to air traffic control. Is that a really good idea for both of you to be in the cloud at the same time and nobody knows where you are? I agree with you. It's not a good idea. So it might be legal, but I would never do that. But what that allows you to do, you can argue whether or not it's safe, but what that allows you to do, since almost nobody's going to be there doing it, the FAA says in uncontrolled airspace, we're going to have less restrictions. So the weather can be worse in Class G airspace, and you can still go flying VFR. We're going to talk about how bad it can be here pretty soon. Interestingly enough, Class G airspace is not marked on charts. If it's not marked, it's Class G. So for instance, if I go back up several slides, whoops, and like on this piece diagram right here, on the faded side, Class Echo goes down to 700, but that means below 700 right here, below 700, that's Class G. On the dark side and out away from it, Class E goes down to 1,200 feet, but below it is Class G. So they don't have to mark Class G. Anybody have any questions about Class G as in golf? How about Class F? Does anybody remember about Class F airspace? There is no Class F airspace in the United States. All right. So there is a diagram I'm going to draw, and I want you to draw it too, and I hope you have room on your notes right there to draw. I deliberately tried to put some room for you to draw, so we'll see how well I can draw. Okay. So if we go up here, so Class A airspace, that's the easiest one to draw. We draw it way up there. It starts at 18,000 feet, goes all the way up to flight level 600. And if you can get above 60,000 feet, that's when you can start worrying about what's above 60,000 feet. I am going to put a dotted line right here. And we're going to call this 10,000 feet. And I am going to put a line over here. We're going to call this right here, we're going to call this 14,500 feet. And all these, unless otherwise specified, are MSL. 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 And the first one I'm going to draw is that nice upside down wedding cake. And here, we're just going to say that this right here is the surface. So here's our upside down wedding cake, and it goes all the way up to 10,000 feet. And that's Class B. Because that's generally, it goes from the surface to 10,000 feet, and it's got particular shape to it. There's also going to be, like there is at Freneau, Yosemite, Class C airspace, and this typically goes to 4,000 feet. MSL. And then there's going to be this class Delta airspace. And I told you I wasn't going to ask you about how high Delta goes up, so I'm not going to put down there. It usually goes up somewhere around 2,500 feet, but it varies. I'm going to put class G in here, and just for fun, I'm going to say that's at 1,200 feet, and that's at 700 feet. So there, I'm very happy with myself. Most of my lines are straight. So I want to go over this. So we already went over class A. Really easy. If we look at the surface of the ground, I made a mistake here. That's, shucks. This is 4,000 feet AGL. It's a good thing you're doing this in pencil. And this is 1,200 feet AGL, and this is 700 feet AGL. So if you notice it, if we did class A, so now we look at class B. Class B goes from the surface to 10,000 feet. It's an upside-down wedding cake. If we look at the next busiest type of airspace, it's class Charlie, class C airspace. It usually goes up to about 4,000 feet, and it's just just the first two pieces of an upside-down wedding cake. It goes at the surface. What's at the bottom of class C airspace? What's on the ground, right smack in the middle of class C airspace? An airport. What's on the ground, Rodrigo, for in class B airspace? Right at the very bottom on the ground. What's right there? What's sitting there? If you looked at a chart and you found class B airspace and you went all the way down to the middle, looked in the very middle, what's on the ground? What's there? The airport. Yeah, okay, Mauricio, this is going to be a tough one. In class Delta airspace, if you went to Delta airspace and looked straight down on a chart in the middle of class Delta airspace, what would you see at the surface? An airport, yeah. So Bravo, Charlie, and Delta are all sitting on top of airports. Which ones have the busiest airports? Class B. What's a little bit less busy? Class Charlie. And what's a little bit less busy than class Charlie? Class Delta. Okay. What you'll also notice in the bottom right-hand corner is that class Gulf airspace in some places goes all the way up to 14,500. But I'm more interested in these places where it comes down, where it only goes up to 700 or 1,200. And remember, it's the magenta lines here. And then everywhere else is class E. So I'm going to actually write that in. Everywhere else. So if it's not A, B, C, D, or G, then that means it's class E. So technically, we've covered all the data already. I just put it in a picture format. Does anybody have any questions about that? Nope. Okay. Yeah, Jonathan. Do you have to talk to air traffic control in class Echo airspace? No. not E and not G. But guess what? If you're flying VFR in a small airplane, are you going to get up to 18,000 feet and get into Class A very often? Not very often. Not if it's only 1 or 200 horsepower engine. You talk 300 horsepower with the turbocharger, maybe. But you're going to be out, so you're not going to be in Class A. Class A, you got to talk on the radio, you got to have a transponder, you got to have an instrument rating. Around here, around Freneau Airport, or the middle of the central San Joaquin Valley, how many Class B airspaces are there around here? A couple? How close? Where's the nearest Class B to Freneau Airport? Anybody? We looked at it yesterday. San Francisco. Another one would be Los Angeles. Okay, so a couple hundred miles here, Class B. Where's Class Airspace to where we're sitting right now? Freneau, Yosemite, holy mackerel. I changed the name from what to be airport. Yeah, so there is a Class C. You got to talk to them on the radio before you go to Class C. Do they have to say the word you're cleared into Class C? Oh, no, they don't. What kind of what do you have to transmit with your transponder? You have to transmit mode C, which is really to transmit your static, correction, the altitude inside. Their computer can correct it with their own altimeter setting. Even if you set your altimeter wrong, I'm telling you, I'll ask you this on the final exam. So if you're flying along and your altimeter is set wrong, does their computer know how high you really are off of your mode C? Yeah, they do. How many Class Ds are around here? We looked at them on the chart yesterday. How many Class D airports? Is there one at Lemoore Naval Air Station? Is there a Class D at what used to be Castle Air Force Base, north of Merced? How about in Modesto? Yeah, so there's a few Class Ds. I bet you $10 if we looked at Bakersfield, I bet it's a Class D airport. Now, could you fly from Reedley to anywhere but those 5 airports? Could you stay out of Class D, B airports? Yeah. I could fly from Reedley, not talk on the radio. I could fly from Reedley to Hanford, Linga, Mendota, after Airport, Delano Airport. I could go to Woodlake. You know, they got a diner at the Woodlake Airport. I could fly there and get a Coke and French fries. So there's lots of airspace you can fly around in, Jonathan, that isn't Class Alpha, Bravo, Charlie, or Delta. And if you're not in Alpha, Bravo, Charlie, or Delta, you don't have to talk to air traffic control. Is your question, could you get all the way to Arizona and not talk to anybody on the radio? Yes. Yes. No. Well, it depends. The problem is my home airport in Arizona, Prescott, is Class D airspace. But they close the tower at 10 o'clock at night. And they don't open it till 6 a.m. So as long as I landed at 12:05 at night, I could go without talking on the radio. Even Class C, if Class C, just for fun, well, I don't know, I haven't looked it up, but Fresno's Class C, if they close the tower at midnight, there's nobody there to talk to anymore. So effectively the Class C disappears, but usually Class C airports, they don't close them down. They still have one person on their radio, you know, eating a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, drinking Mountain Dew. You know, get a good sugar and caffeine buzz to stay awake all night. So does anybody else have any other questions about this chart? If I were to give you this chart unlabeled, would you be able to fill in the altitudes and the AGL and the MSL and the A, B, C, D, E, G? Why don't you think about that while you're studying for the final exam? I wonder if Mr. Johnson and make me fill in all the altitudes and all the AGLs and the MSLs, and the SFC surface. Question? See, you can travel from the U.S. to Mexico.
Let's say you go because if you take a flight from here, there's no one to Mexico, you have to go like somewhere else, and that place is gonna take you to.
Oh, you're talking about going to Cuba. Okay, if you're in the United States, you can take a flight and go straight to Mexico. Well, only wherever the airlines go. If the airline doesn't go there, you can't get there. Now, I take that back. If you charter a jet, let's say you're rich, and you have $20,000, and you call up a charter company in Freneau with a jet, and they say, I want to fly from Reedley to the state of Jalisco, and I want to fly to the airport in Tequila, in the city of Tequila, the state of Jalisco, in the country of Mexico. They're going to look on their chart and see how long the runway is, and they're going to say, yes, our jet can go there, or no, it can't. But immigration and customs to see if you're smuggling anything or have to pay taxes if you're like you bring a lot of alcohol. Like if I go to Tequila, Mexico, I'm probably going to buy a case of adult beverages and bring it back with me. The U.S. Customs, I'll have to declare it on a piece of paper and say how much I brought back, and they might make me pay some taxes on it. So that means I need to drink as much of it in flight as I possibly can. But so if I'm going to fly an airplane, from the United States into Mexico, the first airport I land at, I have to make an arrangement for Mexico Customs to meet us there, and they get to inspect us landing in Mexico. The same thing when I come back. If I take off out of Tequila, Mexico, and I fly straight back to Reedley, Customs won't go to Reedley. So that jet with you and your adult beverages will have to land at an airport that Customs will show up at. Like Customs would show up probably at Freneau, at a big airport. Then they'd fly me down to Reedley. Am I answering your question? So you can fly wherever you want to go, but that first airport, when you land in another country, you have to meet Customs and immigration, have to meet the airplane. Same thing when you're leaving the U.S., same thing when you come back into the United States. Even when I was in the U.S. military, and we flew from North Dakota to Guam, and Guam is actually a U.S. territory, Customs met us at the airplane. And we had to fill out a form about what we brought with us. And I put, no, I did not bring any alcoholic beverages. So John and Martha King, I know they're pretty fun.
Well, hello, fellow pilots. I'm John King.
And I'm Martha King.
Welcome to the complete airspace.
You see how Martha's perm is a perfect circle when she looks straight at you? And you notice how John King leans into the camera and he opens his eyes really big?
Of airspace means to you as a pilot.
And we're going to make it easy to remember all of this too, because you'll learn a word for each airspace letter that will make remembering what you need to know about that class of airspace easy and fun.
In addition to alphabet airspace, we'll also cover other kinds of airspace that you need to know about as a pilot. We'll be covering special use airspace, controlled firing areas, military training routes, air defense identification zones, temporary flight restrictions, special conservation areas, and more.
And finally, we have a special segment that will show you how as a VFR pilot you can manage your flight so that you can deal with the airspace system safely and legally and make the system work for you instead of against you. But enough of this. Let's get started. And to do that, let's join John as he makes the alphabet system of airspace as easy as ABC.
Now, this international airspace system is designed to make you and me worldly. In fact, you and I are about to become international aviation citizens of the world. And the reason is This system is designed to standardize terminology so that no matter where in the world that you and I might fly, we'll both know and understand the airspace system. Now, some people tend to look at this and think, my goodness, this is complicated stuff. Well, the fact is it's not that complicated. In fact, you and I will just now take 30 seconds out and memorize the whole thing. Let's do it. It's that simple. Let's take a look, for instance, at Class A airspace. Well, when you see Class A airspace, think altitude, because that's the airspace at 18,000 feet and above. Now, when you see Class A airspace, you know that you have to be instrument rated and instrument equipped and on an IFR flight plan at an altitude assigned by ATC, because they keep track of all of the airplanes flying at 18,000 feet and above. So when you see Class A airspace, just think altitude. Now, when you see Class B airspace, think big, because this is the airspace that has big airplanes and big airports. You can even think Boeing. So when you see Class B airspace, simply think big, and you've got it memorized. Now, when you see Class C airspace, think crowded or congested. And because Class C airspace is so busy that they give you radar help sequencing you to the airport and you have to talk to them. So think crowded or congested when you see Class C airspace. Now, Class D airspace is easy, folks. Think dialogue, because that's where airports have control towers, and where airports have control towers, you know you must talk to them before you enter the area. So think dialogue when you see Class D. Class E airspace is everywhere else that is controlled airspace. So think elsewhere. It's the airways and space between the airways that isn't some other class of airspace. So when you see Class E, think elsewhere. It's all the other controlled airspace. Now, here is the one I enjoy the most, because when you see Class G airspace, think go for it. Because Class G airspace is uncontrolled airspace, and you can fly in Class G airspace without talking to anybody. Now, I can even make this less complicated and more simple. Here's how. There are really only two classes of airspace. There is uncontrolled airspace, that's Class G airspace, and there is controlled airspace, which is all the rest. What's the difference? Well, in uncontrolled airspace, they do not provide any separation service for IFR flights. Now, if you're an IFR pilot, you can still fly in a cloud in uncontrolled airspace. But when you do that, you're really playing Russian roulette, because they have no idea who else might be in that same cloud with you, because they don't keep track of IFR airplanes in uncontrolled airspace. So normally, you only see the very bravest IFR pilots flying IFR in uncontrolled airspace. Now, what this means to you as a VFR pilot is that in uncontrolled airspace, you can fly much closer to a cloud and probably still be safe and certainly be legal, because you wouldn't normally expect to see somebody come busting out of the cloud and hit you. So in uncontrolled airspace, the required distance from clouds for VFR aircraft is less, and the weather minimums are less. So in Class G airspace, you know it's uncontrolled airspace, and you don't have very strict weather minimums for VFR flight. In all the rest of this airspace, they do provide separation service for IFR flights. So it is all controlled airspace. And for a VFR pilot, you know that the weather minimums are greater in controlled airspace. In fact, in general, if you look at uncontrolled airspace at the bottom and then go up towards the front of the alphabet, you'll find that the airspace becomes more and more complicated and busy, and they provide more and more air traffic control service as you get to the front of the alphabet. And of course, when you get to Class A airspace, they keep track of every single airplane.
Yes. No, I would never fly in the clouds in uncontrolled airspace, even if it's legal, because I'm not as stupid as I look. So stop making assumptions. Just like he said, I said before, if you're in uncontrolled airspace, it's Class G airspace, very good, is that you don't have to talk to air traffic control, and air traffic control even want to talk to you. So if you're in a cloud down there, somebody else could be in a cloud down there. In the cloud, but you don't have to be as far away. And we're going to cover, now that we know what the airspaces are, we've covered who gets to go in and what kind of equipment you have to have, who do you have to talk to, where they are, how do you tell where it is on your chart. The next thing we're going to cover is how good does the weather have to be to go fly into those charts. Except, and I know you're going to be disappointed, is we're going to save that for Monday. Is that all for today? That's all for today in Private Pilot Ground School. Question?